Welcome to Running for Real, a global community with a shared love and curiosity for running. Together we reconnect with the reasons why we love to run and discover ways it helps us become better people. Whether it's the quiet moments of a morning run while the rest of the world still sleeps, or befriending the strangers next to you at the start line of a race, we are here to connect with others who see running as the common thread that weaves our lives together. Come join me, Tina Muir, as I talk with people from all walks of life, united by a love of running. Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 367 of the Running for Real podcast. Thank you for joining me today. I'm excited that you are here and just want to start by saying I am so appreciative of those of you who have purchased Becoming a Sustainable Runner, and especially to those of you who have left a review online. I really appreciate your reviews. It does a massive service to me and Zoe in terms of getting the book out there by your reviews, your feedback online. So thank you to those of you who have. And today I'm excited to be bringing on another author, someone that I was actually very nervous to send a copy of my book to. We did that a few months ago, and I really wasn't sure because this person I have looked up to for many years with his writing. He feels so much more advanced and smarter than me, which you're going to hear about in a little bit. I'll just tell you a bit more about that in just a second. And I was very nervous to send out this book to him because I thought, is he going to think this is too simple, too basic? And those of you who follow me on social media would have seen that he did not think that, and he actually said some really kind things about the book, but he appreciated the book and the ethical and moral reasoning behind it and the importance of that. So I'm excited to welcome back to the show Brad Stulberg, who is the author. We had him on in the past, The Practice of Groundedness, one of my favorite books. Love it. And he is now bringing out Master of Change. I have read it from cover to cover, absolutely loved it. It is so applicable for this period right now, and I think you are going to really enjoy it. It is tangible, it is actionable, it is an easy read, and I just thoroughly enjoyed it. So today, Brad and I are going to have a conversation, but I want to start by saying that Brad and I did not start this off how you might imagine. I just told you how I really admire his work. But I also struggle with envy with Brad. He is someone that I find it hard sometimes. I feel like he has it all together. And I told him this in the interview. Maybe not typically how someone would start a conversation, but it allowed Brad and I to have a very real, very raw, very vulnerable conversation. And I think you're really going to enjoy it. So without any further ado, let's get to this episode with Brad Stulberg. Thank you to Precision Fuel and Hydration for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast and for finally getting me to a place where I feel confident in my fueling and my hydration strategy. And as someone who ran at the world-class level and realizes how much she left on the table in her former life by not getting those two things ready, I want to tell you, if you care about your upcoming goal, do not hold off on this. This is something you want to get dialed at this point, not in the few weeks to go, not in the month to go. You want to build it up now so you have time to practice. And I want to encourage you on that note to go check out their fuel and hydration planner, which is free. You do not have to use Precision products to use it. I definitely encourage you to go check that out. There is a link in the show notes so you can yourself figure out how much carb, fluids, sodium you need to perform at your best in your key runs. So go check out that link in the show notes. You can also go to precisionfuelandhydration.com/Tina. That is going to auto apply a 15% discount code, or you can use the code Tina sent me if you want to just use the discount code yourself. I want to encourage you to go check out the gels. I have a funny thing with textures. I really don't like a lot of the gels on the market, but I love Precision because it goes down very easy. That gel is something I've never had a problem with in terms of stomach upsets. I take it down in one go. It's not something I have to take my time with and struggle through. I really enjoy taking them, especially when I alternate with the chews. I love the lemon and mint combination of flavors there. And with the gels, you can get a caffeinated version or a non-caffeinated version, depending on what you need. And I love that there is a high carb content in there of 30 grams of carb per product. In addition to that, they do have the hydration products with electrolytes. Depending on your sweat rate and the strength that you need, you can get yourself any of those. I have been using those throughout the summer and really enjoying using them. So again, go to precisionfuelandhydration.com/Tina or use code Tina sent me to get 15% off and go check out that planner. It is free. It is there for you to use. It is in the show note. Go check it out. Brad, welcome back to the Running Through podcast. I am excited to have you back on. And I have to say, I was really excited when your book came through the mail. I always love your thinking. And I think I said this to you last time. We're kind of always on a similar wavelength. So it was just perfect timing. So I appreciate you being here again.
Thanks for having me, Tina. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, this is going to be good. And I think, okay, one fun question I want to ask you right now. Doing lots of podcasts myself for the book, the same question comes up. There's one question for us that comes up every single time. And it wasn't what I would have expected it. For us, it is, how did this book come about? I would love to know for you, when you get interviewed, when you're asked things, what is the one question you're getting asked about this book to start with?
I think why I wrote it, which is
similar then.
Very similar to how did this book come about. Yeah, you're a little bit ahead of me, I feel like, in the interview process. So I don't have as big of a sample size, perhaps, but that one is seeming to come up all the time.
And did you have that with the last book as well?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it's a good question because it gives a lot of context and framing to whatever is in the book, you know, because it's shaped by the person that wrote it and where they're at when they decided to write it.
Mm-hmm. That is very true. And so I want to give listeners a little bit more insight into it. We did have you on in a previous episode. There will be links in the show notes to go get that. But you do have a new book out, Master of Change, How to Excel When Everything is Changing, Including You. I don't think anyone listening is going to resonate with that because it's not like we just went through a global pandemic together. But so I'm not going to ask you that question because I feel like obviously the subtitle makes it a bit deeper, the question, but we have all been struggling with working through change. There is a lot of change that is happening. And you yourself have been very honest about your change. You and I are also in a similar stage of life. I think your son is, I'm trying to remember, is he 4?
Ooh, close. He's 5.5. And then my daughter is 8 months. So I didn't have a daughter last time we spoke.
No,
now I do.
You didn't. No, but my daughter's also, yes, exactly. 5.5 is my daughter too. So we're in that similar stage with that one. Does that mean kindergarten is just about to approach?
It does.
Yeah, me too.
We're excited. I'm sure you are too.
I'm excited. This is off topic, but people like the conversational piece of this. When I didn't think I was going to be someone that got emotional when I saw her go, like, I was like, whatever, like she goes to preschool, it's the same thing. But when they took us around on the, like, go to see the school night and they were like, here's her music teacher. And I was like, she has a music teacher. And they'd be like, here's her art teacher. And I'm like, she has an art teacher. Like it started hitting me of like, wow, this is kind of a big deal. So what about for you? How are you feeling with that piece of it?
I'm feeling great. And great because I'm really excited for him. I think he's going to love it. But I'm also bittersweet great because it is a milestone and it does mark this juncture where he is no longer a baby. I mean, he hasn't been a baby for a long time, but going to the big building where the 5th graders are, he's a kid, and one day he'll be a big kid, and one day he'll be a teenager, and one day he'll be an adult, and talk about a change that we all want. We want our kids to do well, and we want to see them grow up, and it's also very can be very hard.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that and being vulnerable with that, because it is, something I'm sure a lot of listeners will go through. We're not going to follow down this parenting path. But I do want to begin kind of almost flipping it and starting backwards with something that I think last time I was really honest with you about something. And I want to be honest with you about something again, starting this. And I want to use this as our jump off point to talking about the book. And so, I mean this with love, but sometimes I feel a little with when I see your stuff, it feels like you've got everything together. And I'm just being totally honest with you here, but sometimes I'm like, God, he just like has it all nailed. I think it's more envy than jealousy, knowing the correct definitions of those two words. But like, I would just love to begin there, because you talked about, I think when you last came on, you've definitely been through that 8-month chunk of your OCD being very crippling. And so that's the hard thing, is that you have talked very openly and vulnerably about this tough period in your life. But since our last conversation, sometimes I find myself thinking like, God, Brad just is like at the end point. He's got it all down. He understands. Yes, he had a tough time, but he's got it together. So I want to start there by being honest, and also hearing your response to that, because sometimes people say that things to me and I'm like, are you kidding me? I seem like I've got it all together. Like, absolutely not. So what is your response to me saying that?
My response is, I'm in a good spot right now. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't say that I have it all together. I don't think that anybody has it all together. Mm-hmm. I would say that over the last year and a half, I'm in a really nice rhythm with my mm-hmm. creative work. Mm-hmm. My writing is just smooth and it seems to be flowing. I know it won't always be like this. Mm-hmm. Parenting is going really well. We've moved to a place that accommodates our lifestyle. So I feel really blessed. So day to day, do I like never have reactionary moments that I regret? Like, of course not. I have those moments. But in the big scheme of things, I feel like things are going great. And I want to be honest when that's the case too, knowing that mm-hmm. it won't always be the case. Mm-hmm. There's been lows, there's been highs, there's been times in between. I think the other thing that maybe goes into this, and we talked about this a little bit the last time I was on, if I remember correctly, is I don't really post anything from my personal life on social media, good or bad. So I wonder if what you're saying is like my writing is in a good groove right now. Because the only thing that's on there are words.
That's true.
And I do feel like my writing's in a good groove. Mm-hmm. But I think part of the reason that I don't post anything from my personal life is because I don't want people to think it's going great or it's going terribly. I don't really want people outside of my local community to know what the heck's going on. Mm-hmm. So that's just interesting. But I will own that. And I can only do this because I've had times where I couldn't write a word. But yeah, over the last year and a half, especially like this book, it was definitely like a good groove and a good rhythm. Mm-hmm. And I feel like things are really clicking with my creative work and my written work, which is all I share publicly. Mm-hmm. But there are other elements of my life that like things aren't going that hot. I just choose not to share those. And there are other elements of my life where things are going great, and I choose not to share those as well.
Yes. And thank you for that. And like part of me like saying that was like, oh, that's, talk about like kicking someone for no particular reason. And I really don't mean it in a way. It's just, I really, as you said, you have been totally in a flow with your writing. It is very visible. Like everything you write is just dialed and really thoughtful and intentional and powerful. Like sometimes you do talk about, again, you and I are in a similar situation of life of like influencers who might be like, you have to start your day by drinking 3 of these shots, and then you have to take a 1-hour meditation, and then da-da-da-da-da. And it's just not realistic for many of us. And so you speak to those things. And I do wonder with me if it pushes at some button in that I don't do that. I don't hide enough of myself away. I do kind of leave it all out there. And maybe I should do a little bit more of that and keeping more. I mean, I don't put my kids' faces online, but I don't really put much of them online. But maybe I should be doing more of that because it allows you to get in that creative writing flow and those pieces of you that can then excel and shine. So that's me talking out loud. And
I think it just depends on what your goals are. There's no right or wrong, and this can change over time. Mm-hmm. But right now, my goal with the internet, really the entire internet, is to engage in ideas and to share ideas. But it's not really about building community or friendships. It's about sharing ideas because I want to prioritize the community building and the friendships in the town that I live. That might shift, but that's what's interesting. Because when you first say that, first, like I'm in a weird way, like I'm honored, like, oh, like that I have it all together. But then like, I wonder what you mean by that. Because it's just words. And most of the words that I share on social media are actually just snippets from my past books.
Yeah.
So maybe what you're saying is that you like my books, which I'm honored.
I definitely like your books for sure. Like I breezed through this. I loved it. I love reading your writing. And like I said, I think for me, it probably pushes at something in me that I am not able to do. And I am not able to, I am too insecure in myself to be able to like,
or the flip side, let me interject. Steps. Maybe it's something that you're not able to do, but like just to be really clear. So I use social media predominantly for marketing.
Yeah.
And I do it because I care deeply about reading and writing. I am an avid reader. I read 100 books a year. I read for a living and I write for a living. And I believe that books can change people's lives. Yeah. And I am proud of my books. I put a lot of effort into them. I think that they are good. So I don't do it in a sleazy way. I genuinely think that purchasing one of my books or any good book is the best $20 to $35 investment anybody can make. So social media is just marketing something that I feel really good about. But when I have that relationship with it, I don't need to do anything but put forward my best written work because I am just marketing a product and the product is a book. Now, if I was trying to build a quote unquote personal brand, that's very different than trying to sell a book.
That's true. Very true. Very true.
And there's no right or wrong. I think it's just like really being intentional about this because I could talk about this all the time and I've thought about it. So in my own athletic pursuit, it is another area of my life where things are clicking right now for me, but not in the same way, but my strength training is going really well. I'm deadlifting more weight than I ever have. I've been training injury free for almost 2 years. And believe you me, I am tempted to start posting that. But the reason behind that temptation is just insecurity. Because for me, it's like, why can't it just be enough that I did this? And if I need to compete or I need to have people tell me I'm doing good, it should just be the people that are in the power rack next to me at my gym. And that I think is what allows me to do it. But it's not always easy to make those choices. And it's the same thing when I'm going through something that is really challenging. It's not related to my writing. I also don't share that because I don't want people to like it and be like, oh, you're so vulnerable. I call up my best friend and I tell him that because like that's the person that I actually want to talk about it with. So I'm glad that we got to dive into it. It's reaffirming for me right now that the strategy that I have is working for me, which is I believe in books and I believe in reading. And for me, I use social media as a place to meet people with words so that they can read and hopefully they like what they're reading enough to then read a book. And even if it's not my book, just like to read, to get people more into reading. I'm probably one of the only accounts on Instagram where I think my entire grid has like one image and everything else is just words. So it really comes from like a place of intention.
Thank you to Tracksmith for all your support with everything that I am doing with Running for Real and beyond. I am so thankful for this relationship that I have with this brand. And I do call it a relationship intentionally. If you have seen about my book event that I hosted in Boston just recently, you will see that I called this a relationship. It is not transactional. It is not you do this, I'll do this. We have a friendship. We're besties. And there is with good reason, because I believe in all that Tracksmith is giving to our community to make our world better. They do so many different things within the community to show support, to put their money where their mouth is and care. Because now we want to find brands that care about our world and want to make the world a better place. And Tracksmith is that company. In addition, of course, to making incredibly high quality products that are long lasting. And that is one of the biggest things we can do if you want to make changes to be environmentally conscious, is to get quality items that last a long time and can handle the toughness of the way that we as runners treat our clothes. I want to just tell you about a few of my favorite items. The Lane 5 shorts are my favorite shorts. I know I always talked about the session speed shorts. I think I've shifted to the Lane 5. They have 5 pockets. They are perfect for marathon racing or ultra racing. One of those is zip pockets. The others are perfect for gels. They sit nicely. They do not ride up, and they are just very comfortable. So those Lane 5 shorts I am really enjoying. We are also just about stepping into the stage where my fave item of all time with Tracksmith, the Brighton base layer, is just coming into its own. This is the number one product I recommend for people who are new to Tracksmith, the Brighton base layer. It is ideal for fall, ideal for winter, ideal for just taking with you anywhere. I do take it on most trips that I go on. So as a friend of mine, if you have never used Tracksmith before, you can use code TINANEW to get yourself $15 off your order at $75 or more. If you are a current Tracksmith customer, you can use code TINAGIVE, and that will give you free shipping, and you will make a donation to Track Girls on behalf of yourself to show your support. So thank you so much to Tracksmith for sponsoring this episode, for supporting me. I encourage you to go check it out at tracksmith.com/Tina. And I want to get to that in a minute. You made it a major focus here, like about solidifying your core values, your intention. I want to get to that point. I actually do want to go to the strength training. That was another thing I wanted to speak to from this, because I really loved that section where you talked about your growth and the change in your relationship, in particular to strength training, but sport in general. And I have gone a very similar path and reached a point now where I really don't care about the result next to my name. And it is so freeing to be able to go do that. I can do really what I feel like doing. I still push myself, I still challenge myself, but it is just a different relationship. And so maybe you could explain the kind of, I think it was maybe 3 stages you went through with your strength training and what that point is you are at right now in what you've just mentioned.
This gets to the core of the subtitle, right? Mm-hmm. How to skillfully work with change when everything is changing, including you. And the subtitle is How to Excel. I like to think of it skillful, but it's one and the same. And it's a big area in my life where my identity has changed so much around being an athlete. So rewind way back in the day to grade school and then into middle school. And I got bullied really hard growing up. First through 3rd grade, it was so bad that we had to move schools. I was just like a weird kid. I was probably what today we'd call like a highly sensitive or a feeler. And, 35 years ago, a young male feeler was going to get bullied. So I got bullied. Mm-hmm. And then in 7th grade, I got jumped on the side of the road by these 2 punks, and like they just beat me up. So I had a pretty rough go physically. And my parents decided that they're going to let me play football. And no small part was because like I got beat up, and they're like, all right, he needs to get his self-confidence back. Cause as a kid, I was like scared to walk alone outside. Didn't want to get beat up. So I got really into football, and it was completely from this insecurity of, I want to have a body that cannot get beat up by older kids. And, my genetics were pretty good for strength training. So I started to adapt, and I started to get really big and fast and powerful. And you're in high school, so your kind of first identity is forming. And, for better or worse, I'm just going to be honest, like girls started liking me because I was good at football. So the first phase of my relationship as an athlete was purely born out of insecurity. I didn't want to get beat up, and I wanted girls to like me. And being strong and good at football was the ticket to that. So then I finished my high school football career. I have a good high school football career, but it's not spectacular. It's not good enough to play in college at a big school. So I go to college and I don't play football. And I can't even go to the football games at the University of Michigan because it was just too close to something that I love so much. I could not see the point of getting drunk and cheering on a team if I wasn't on the field playing. So I did this complete shift, and I started to get into endurance sports. And at the time, I was in a very serious relationship with this girl. Her name was Shelly. And I thought she was the girl I was going to marry. And then she just utterly broke my heart my junior year of college. We'd been dating since freshman year. It's like this, telltale love story. I met her in the dorms. We're dating for 3 years, and then she breaks my heart. So what do I do when I'm insecure and I'm hurt? I throw myself into sport. It's kind of like a theme in my life. So I get super into triathlon and endurance sports. You can just go numb yourself by sitting on a bike and swimming and running. Running's not enough because running, you can only do so much, but triathlon, you can just do forever. So I throw myself into endurance sports, and my relationship with endurance sports becomes one to just avoid like the pain of this breakup. And then I get pretty good in endurance sports. Not great. My genetics are much more for strength. But it became an enormous part of my identity. So I'm like the hobby runner, right? I wanted to break 3 hours for a marathon. I wanted to go under 10 hours for an Ironman. So I was like pretty good, but nowhere near like truly elite. Mm-hmm. But I wasn't doing it so much because I loved the sport. I was doing it really as like an escape from like, the pain of a breakup, which then led to like, what if I'm never going to be happy with someone, so on and so forth. So fast forward to now, and I'm happily married. Thank God that girl broke up with me because I couldn't imagine being with anyone other than my wife. I've got these 2 kids. Life is in a really good spot. I stopped with the endurance sports about 5.5 years ago. This was a shitty thing. I have a condition in my calf called chronic exertional compartment syndrome, which makes running really, really painful, almost a non-starter. So I had the surgery. It's called a planned fasciotomy, and it gave me enough relief where I can hike now, thank God, but I still can't really run. So I let running and endurance sports go, and I got back into strength training because being an athlete has just always been there with me. So I want to now fast forward back to, or I guess rewind back to, I don't know, it's almost 1.5 years ago now. And I put in a good cycle of strength training for a year, got this great gym in Asheville, and I'm ready to test my lifts. And the owner of the gym, who also coaches athletes, is there with me. And I remember him telling me, he's like, you're like a Zen master right now, and Zen masters don't lift a lot of weight. Like, you got to be able to turn it on. And I just could not find that switch. And I didn't know why at the time. It was very weird. But ultimately, it came down to like, I just didn't care. Like, whether or not I made the squat just didn't really matter. So I couldn't find that extra gear. And this coach is like, I've seen you train. I know that there's more in you. You just got to find it. And I'm like, I can't. And at the time, it was just this bizarre experience, but it was noteworthy enough where like I talked to my wife about it. I talked to Zach, the coach, about it. I talked to my good friend Justin about it, but like, I couldn't really make sense of it. And then later on, I don't know, a couple of days later, it occurred to me that it's the first time in my life I've been competing without a deep insecurity behind it. Mm-hmm. And I just don't know how to do that. So in the past, when I was lining up on the start line of a marathon, or I was in the gym trying to hit a new PR, it's like my entire self-worth was on the line. And for the first time, it's not, which is great. I feel like I'm so mature, so much more mature and so much healthier because of it. But now I don't know how to be a good athlete. Like, I cannot muster that same because it's not all on the line. And I'm not a pro athlete, thank God, because if I was, this would be really problematic. But I think that what it ultimately comes down to is like, is there a way that I can turn on that switch and still give it my all from a place of like love or solidity instead of insecurity and fear? And I haven't found it, to be honest. And I don't know if I ever will. So that's the story, not to way over intellectualize training, but I think it's really interesting. And when I say I don't care, I don't mean it like capital C care, because I do. Like, I train and I want to get better and I want to make progress and I want to see what I'm capable of. So I do care, but that extra gear, it was just an insecurity that's no longer there.
Yes.
Which is crazy because, so much of what I write about is like performing from a place of love. And with my writing, I can do it. With my relationships, I can do it. But in sport, like, there's just such a habitual pattern of 30 years of my life. I guess the breakup happened. It's more like 24 years of my life, 23 years of my life, where the driving force behind accomplishment in sport and being able to go to the well was insecurity. And now my next challenge is to learn how to do it from a place of solidity, not insecurity. So that's my soapbox. You asked for it.
I did ask for it, but I have a intentional reason for this, because this has been actually a topic that has fascinated me.
And by the way, I don't have
years.
Everything together. I'm a total head case based on the last 10 minutes.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. You didn't break it down into 3 bullet points that you said in 3 concise sentences. No, I really appreciate this. And I find this topic fascinating. I tried to talk to Rich Roll about this topic a few years ago, and he didn't really have like the experience himself to speak to it, but you, when you explained that, really did and do. And I am, as I said, very much in a similar state, and I'm just going to assume you don't know anything about what I've been up to since we last talked. Or I mean, I know we have updated each other a little bit, but I'm going to just say most of it. I was a professional elite marathoner, quit the sport because of burnout, health issues, came back to the sport, tried to find this balance of where I was, maybe not trying to get to that level, but still competing. Ended up miserable because I was trying to like blast my way through. Compared to before, again, running is relative, as is everything, a lot less fit than I was before, but couldn't let go of that. And again, same as you, that was insecurity. Then I went into guiding, doing a lot of service for visually impaired runners, my friend with Down syndrome, like all this. But I still didn't want to be in races myself. I used guiding and giving back as an excuse because I didn't want to do it myself. I didn't want to put myself out there.
Because you were scared that you'd go slower?
I don't know.
Or you just you couldn't do it without knowing that you weren't giving it your all, which is another really interesting challenge. Yes. It's like if you knew like there's more in here, because you know what it's like to be a pro and to have training be the centerpiece of your life.
Yeah.
So to feel like you're doing it without that is almost like, what's the point? Like if you know that there's more in there, you're never going to be satisfied with yourself.
Exactly. And so I did London earlier this year, and I ran the first 19 miles with a friend. And I just felt like I'm just going to pick it up the last 7. And I quite liked that. But I think that, again, was a protective measure. If I'm running with a friend, I'm running at his pace. I'm not doing my own thing. And then I did my first ultra in May. And even that, I couldn't, like you talked about that gear, I couldn't find it. Like my last 2 miles were like under 7-minute pace. There is no reason in a 50-mile race I should have run my last 2 miles that fast, but I couldn't step over the line. And so I just found this fascinating because I'm very much in the same stage, but in a different way. Like I'm curious to push my boundaries in new ways. I did that 50-mile. I did a 1-mile race like a month later. I'm curious to try new things, but I can't. My end of it is that I can't seem to take that extra gear to commit to anything. I'm always like looking for ways out to avoid going into that state. And I don't know if that's facing, like you said, facing the fact that maybe I'm not where I was before. Maybe I can't ever get there before. I don't have the energy and time to do it. But yeah, I just found it interesting because it very much described how I feel in my running, and same with my strength training. Like when it's that moment when you have to, the weight resists a little bit and you have to push on, I'm like, I can't do it. And he's like, yes, you can. And I'm like, no, I can't. And I just back off. So yeah, I
think there's 2 ways to look at it. And I think they're both true.
Mm-hmm.
I think one is it's something to work through.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a season and you'll probably get to the other side of it. And that might happen for both of us.
Yeah.
I think the other way to think about it is it's a wonderful accomplishment and achievement that you don't care that much anymore, because it means that there are other things in your life that are fulfilling you and giving you enough meaning.
That's true.
Where whether or not you hit the PR or not, at the end of the day, like it's just not as important. The writer Ryan Holiday, I once had the privilege of facilitating a conversation with him when one of his books came out a few years ago. And he's a very genetically gifted runner. So Ryan will go out and run like 6-minute miles with basically no structured training ever. someone said, like, why don't you race? And Ryan said, I'm not trying to win at my hobbies.
Yeah.
And that's something that sticks around with me quite a bit too, because it's like, it's different. You were a pro. I was never a pro. But I have this weird relationship with sport where it's like, it's more than a hobby, but it's still just a hobby. And another part of it, I think, is like the thing that I'm laying it all on the line with right now is like my intellectual work and my writing. And I can find the extra gear there. And it might just be that this stuff's a hobby. And, my coach might not like to hear this and he might never fully understand, but like, I might only be able to get to a 9.5 out of 10 because that last 0.5%, like, it's not what hobbies are for. But I'm willing to keep experimenting because I think there's also a little bit of like just like learning how to really give it your all when you're not doing it for insecure reasons in sport. Because I can do it in other areas of my life. But like I said, I use that word like rehearsal or repeated practice. Just sport and my identity has been so intertwined since I was bullied in 3rd, 2nd grade. Like one of my only memories from that school, it was called Roper. And screw those assholes that went to Roper and bullied me. But like the only visual memory that I can have from that period was recess because we got to play soccer and I was better than the other kids at soccer. So it was like the one time when I wasn't getting made fun of or bullied. But that's what sport became to me in all these different ways. And now for the first time, I don't need sport to be that. So the kind of like more nihilistic approach is I'm not trying to win at my hobbies. It's fine. The more maybe hopeful approach and the one that I'm more curious about is like, what does this new relationship with sport look like? And I'm your age. So hopefully we live long lives and we still have the second half of our lives to reimagine that relationship and recreate it.
Yes, exactly. So then my second question to this, and then we'll move on to core values as I wanted to go into. I feel like because I've reached that point in my running and my athletic life where I am perfectly happy if I have a 6-hour marathon next to my name. I feel like I've almost diverted that insecurity into my work in some ways. And again, that ties into what we were talking about earlier in that I have, yes, a personal brand. I'm building it. I'm putting it all out there. But sometimes I wonder how much of book writing is me trying to like stuff down that insecurity rather than dealing with it. So do you think with this sport example, with this piece of this insecurity, you have worked through it or has it found its way somewhere else?
I think that it was so tied to sport that it was like compartmentalized in a very extreme way in that part of my life. I think I'm still insecure elsewhere, but not in the same way that it was like the core thing driving my performance. I think anybody that publishes a book has some ego born out of insecurity because like you have your name on this thing that you want people to read. And I no longer think that's problematic. I don't try to get it to go away. I'm just like, yeah, like that's just a fact. That's true. I hope what's in there is good. But of course, there's like some ego in writing a book. And I think most ego is born out of insecurity. But that's okay. One of my favorite books is The Wisdom of Insecurity by a guy named Alan Watts. That's basically like anyone that tells you that they're not secure is full of like, anyone that tells you that they are not at all insecure is full of shit. And the wisdom of insecurity is like generally what's underneath that insecurity is like wanting to be loved and wanting to be known. And those are not bad things. It's only the pursuit of those things in the wrong places that becomes bad. But yeah, it's a different kind of insecurity, like do I want my books to do well and not flop? Of course. But with strength training, it was like, that was it. Like that was like the anchor at that time of my life that I was holding on to in terms of like being a strong person. Whereas now I just feel like there's more components to my identity. So if a book really goes to shit, I can lean into the stuff I do with the growth equation professionally. And I still have my family life and I still have my friends and my community and I still have my training. My training goes to shit. I still have my book writing. My hope is that my family doesn't go to shit. That would be the hardest. But I do in the back of my head, because I researched this book, think like I need to make sure that my life is robust enough and my marriage is robust enough that even though it's hard to imagine, when both of my kids move out of the house, I expect that to be painful, but I don't want that to be so disorienting that I fall into depression or the marriage ends. Because I don't know about you, but like there are so many people that I know who are at that phase of their life, and a lot of them are getting divorced. And I don't know if it's just like a Gen X thing. And I don't judge, because everyone thinks like, oh, that can never happen to me. But you think those people thought it was going to happen to them? Of course not. And it's the same story over and over, which is like, I love my partner and we were great co-parents, but now our kids are gone. And we've like that phase of our life has ended. And again, like I don't judge, because who knows what's going on in other people's life. But that's been a really good teacher to me, to be like, oh yeah, that would never happen to me, which is precisely the reason why I ought to pay attention to it. Because once you think it would never happen to you, then it's going to happen to you, because you're not like doing the work.
Yes.
So yeah, it's just, and this is a theme in the book, so it's on my mind, of course, but like just diversifying my identity a little bit and making sure that, if you think of identity like a house with multiple rooms, making sure that I spend time in all the important rooms and I never leave any room fully behind.
Thank you to AG1 for sponsoring this episode of the Running For Real podcast. I have been using AG1 for, since 2019, which is coming up on 4 years now, and it's going to give you those essential nutrients for long-lasting benefits. I have been using this for many years, and especially right now with a book tour, with all these things I have going on in my life, my AG1 has been a critical piece of taking care of my gut health, giving me focus and energy to help me with healthy aging and my immune health. I love that it is one scoop in some water every morning. It is the first thing I do. That's going to give me 75 high quality vitamins, minerals, and whole food source nutrients. It's that comprehensive nutrition in one simple scoop. It is a ritual that I have every morning. I wake up, that's the first thing I do, and I know that it takes care of me. So it's so much more than just taking greens, as you might hear other things talk about. It's going to give you that comprehensive blend of core health products that are going to work together to fill in your gaps. So for me right now, with 2 young kids and this hectic schedule, I am missing out on some nutrients, and this is where I know I'm taking care of myself in that way. So as a friend of mine, you can get a 1-year free supply of vitamin D3 plus K2 by going to drinkag1.com/Tina. That's drinkag1.com/Tina. It is going to make it so that you have one thing to take. It will take care of you. It'll be there for you. You can take it on the go. We're going to give you that 5 free travel packs when you go to drinkag1.com/Tina. I've been loving it for years. And those of you who have been signed up for a while would have seen that you got a goodie recently. Anyone who was an AG1 user when my book came out will know that you got a copy of the book as a gift from AG1, and that just speaks to the kind of people they are. They care about you, they care about me, and they care about the world. So go check it out at drinkag1.com/Tina. Yeah, that is so true and so important. And I do love that you, and there's a lot of conversations happening around this concept of identity now, because you are so right. And I do think you talk about generational thing, the kind of previous generations just stuck with each other no matter what. Like they still were going through this, still had no identity of their own, and just kind of lived that way for the rest of their lives. Didn't really have any hobbies, just like kind of sitting, waiting for the kid to call once a week or whatever. So I love that this is a common theme now of recognizing that you are more than one thing, and we don't have to be just a parent. Even though, I'm sure you can attest, like it is hard sometimes when the kids are like running around the house screaming, and you can't do. It feels like that is like taking up your entire brain space, or at least for me, sometimes in those moments it does. And you're like, how can I be anything else when these little people are literally dictating my day and what it looks like when you're home with them, all day. So, I can see how it happens. All right. I want to get to values here. I really loved that you gave a list out the back of core value examples, and you gave a bit of explanation into how how to go about figuring out what yours are, because I feel like I've come across this concept a lot. What are your core values? And actually, Zoe, my co-author, often talks about core values. But I had always struggled with like, well, what does that mean? Like, how would I figure out what mine are? And I actually have figured it out thanks to your book, which was a great exercise. But for someone listening to this who hears this term core values, and they might see in another book like 3 examples, and they're like, yeah, relationships, community, love. Got it. Yeah, those are my 3. But they like, how would you set about, other than obviously buying the book and looking at the list at the back there, in figuring out what someone's core values are? If they see a list, is it like what you're drawn to? What would you say is the way to figure it out if you've never have before?
Ooh, good question. I would look at the list and I would just go through them all and start to write down those are the ones that you're drawn to, and probably come up with like 15 to 20. Mm-hmm. And then I would group those 15 to 20, and I would try to get those into like 8 groups. Right. And then I'd take those 8 groups and I'd say, all right, can't have 8. If I can only have 5 or less, what groups am I going to cut? And then you get down to 5 groups. And then for each of those groups, you want to come up with the word or the concept that is most going to capture everything in that group. And then you want to define what you mean by that term and how you're going to practice it. This is not something to do in 10, 15 minutes. I think this exercise takes between an hour and 3 hours. And if you're doing it as a part of a team or a family unit, it can take a day. But yeah, I think it's just like a constant pruning, because you're right. You look at a list and all these things sound good. Mm-hmm. So I try to have people, when I advise people on how to go through this exercise, just like get down to like 15 to 20 off the bat. And then let's just start grouping those together and whittling down from there.
Mm. And would you say it's okay if the ones that they're, okay, so let's say they've got their groups, but it feels like maybe 2 out of one group, both of those words feel powerful, but then maybe they decide to get rid of one of the other groups. Or would you try to pick words that are in different categories, so you're not just like all right, in the heart, love?
Yeah, exactly. I would like pick a word for each of the groups.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And then I just keep like whittling down and experimenting with it. And people are going to have different core values, but I think that for most people, you can get it down to like 3 or 5. And then life becomes a lot simpler when you just say, hey, these are the 3 to 5 things I'm going to optimize on here, so I'm going to do it. Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you for that. That was something that I really appreciated that you had that list. Because even the word values for me, and this is, something that maybe is just me, and this is really embarrassing, but I still struggle with knowing what so embarrassing. Like what a noun is, what an adjective is, what all of those things, I still have to sit and think about it for each one, which I know is something I definitely should have learned by 35. But when someone would say values, I was like, well, does that mean what kind of words are we talking about here? So I just really appreciated that you had that in there. And I definitely encourage people to go do this exercise, because I have found it very helpful, in thinking about decisions of what to say yes and what to say no to in my life, as I've moved forward. Any last thoughts on core values? I do want to go on to something else after this.
I think my only last thought is that in the context of change, core values are especially important, mm-hmm. because you can bring them with you, mm-hmm. as you change and as the situation around you changes. Yes. So when there's a big life change, you can always ask yourself, how can I respond in a way that aligns with my core values? Or how can I practice my core values? So if a core value is health and you end up really injured or ill and you can't do your primary pursuit, you can't run, well, you could say, well, what would it mean to be healthy given the context that I'm in right now? Is it a walk? Is it actually health includes mental health and it's releasing from the need to do anything? Yep. But I think that's the real importance of core values, is that nobody can take your core values away from you. Mm-hmm. So when everything around you changes and you need to adapt and be super flexible and it feels like the ground that you're on is shaky, you can almost always come back to your core values as a solid anchor and a source of ruggedness.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and in that health example, you talked about, progress being hard work and rest. So maybe the health is the rest piece during that time. And it's something you haven't particularly been able to stick to in the past. So
that's right.
I do want to talk about something again in towards the end of the book where you talked about this conversation you had with your therapist. This was during your intense OCD period of time where it was really affecting your life. And she said to you about, you were trying to find meaning and purpose in what was happening. And this is something that I am guilty of doing as well. And you talked about how when someone's really going through something really like crippling, you can't saying to that person, I'm sure it'll be for a good reason, or you're going to learn something from it. It's like the worst thing you could possibly say. Just like with runners or with when you're injured, saying to someone like, oh, it happened for the better. That's like not the one thing you want to hear, even if that is true down the road. So can you share that story? Because I do think that is a really powerful moment where she said what she said to you and why it is okay to acknowledge that. And let's maybe talk about that concept and tragic optimism. So share that story.
All right. So there are different types of changes, and I put them in 4 quadrants. Okay. So there's small good changes, small bad changes, big good changes, and big bad changes. And for any of the small changes or for the big positive change, there's almost incontestable research that shows that having a growth mindset, viewing it as an opportunity to learn, as a challenge, practicing gratitude, those are really important psychological constructs, and they're skills that are helpful to have and mindsets that are helpful to have in work. However, for the shitty quadrant, the really big negative changes, oftentimes trying to find meaning or growth or to be grateful for what happened to you just backfires. Mm-hmm. Because you take something that sucks already and you make it suck twice as bad because now you're judging yourself that you can't even do what the self-help books tell you to do. Yes. And when I was in the thick of my experience with OCD and secondary depression, I remember really being like, well, whatever part of my brain was still functioning during that period latched onto this idea of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, and I'll find meaning in this suffering and I'll grow from it. But it just felt like I was lying to myself. It felt so contrived. Like it just didn't feel like that was happening. And my therapist at the time, Brooke, told me, why can't this just suck? Why do you have to find meaning in this? Why can't this just be something that is painful? Why can't you just be kind to yourself? Why can't it just be enough to get through? And I distinctly remember like having existential despair for a week after she said that. Like, oh my God, this isn't meaningful. Like, it's even worse if it's not meaningful. But eventually, it was this enormous burden that was lifted off my shoulders, which was it didn't have to be meaningful. I didn't have to find anything good about it. It could just suck. And that's scary. And it's a mature thing to realize that sometimes things just suck. Sometimes pain has no meaning. It's just senseless. Sometimes the world is just random and cruel. Now, what's fascinating is fast forward 5 years and I look back on that experience and I learned and grew so much as a result of it.
Yes.
But you only get that good stuff once you're on the other side. So for like the capital T traumas in our life, trying to create meaning when we're going through it sometimes backfires. So I view this as like a tool, right? And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So whenever you're going through any kind of change, if you can find meaning in it, do it. But if you're trying to find meaning in it and you can't, instead of judging yourself and spiraling into despair, you could just tell yourself like, you know what, this is meaningless right now and that's okay. I just need to get through it. And when I get to the other side, like maybe there'll be some meaning. And as terrible as bad OCD and depression is, there are far worse things. I mean, people lose children. So like what I wanted to address in the book is what I think, and I'm going to swear, I hope that's okay, is just this utter bullshit that you see on the internet about like gratitude. Mm-hmm. And it's like, yeah, gratitude's great. When things are going well, gratitude's great. But people also go through such severe, significant trauma and loss that telling someone like, if you just practice gratitude, that's what it will take to get through is offensive. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to address that because I haven't seen it addressed in a book like this. And I just feel it's so important. Because researchers identify this. There are certain things that we just don't grow from. Nobody grows from getting raped. Yep. And I think that there's this terrible expectation that every trauma should lead to growth. And sometimes things just suck. And the greater the insult or the greater the negative change, the longer time it takes to experience growth if you ever do. And I just don't want people to judge themselves if they're going through really hard times and they can't find meaning in it. I want people to realize that sometimes that's okay. Now, if everything in your life is meaningless always, that's a sign of depression. And that's a sign that's not normal. And I hope that person gets help for that. But for really hard things, it's okay for them to be meaningless sometimes.
And I really appreciated you speaking to that because you did, this ties into, I'm forgetting the term of it now, where you talked about, is it toxic positivity? Do you use those words or did you use something different?
I think I talk about being a Pollyanna. So the extreme of just everything's great always, bury your head in the sand.
Yes.
And then there's the other extreme, which is despair and nihilism. And neither of those are very useful.
So, as this is a topic close to my heart, when it comes, I would just personally love your thoughts on related to this. So we've got climate change is happening. I have a very strong love for Lahaina. So this is very sensitive to me right now with what I'm seeing about Maui. And this is an example of something where, those people in that situation, for them, this is a good example, right? Of it just sucks. It is just horrible, horrific. I feel anguish. They feel anguish, all that. But then this is also an example of where we need to be able to use it, find some way to take action from this. So do you have thoughts on that piece of it, of acknowledging that climate related disasters happening to us, or the fact that we can't seem to get anything moving to actually make change? Is frustrating, but wanting to be able to use this mindset of okay, how can I grow? Maybe not how can I grow, but how can I use this way I'm feeling to take some action in my own life?
The way that I think of it is, if we're going to fix a broken world, we just can't become broken people.
Mm-hmm. You did say
and that's
that in a bit.
Really hard. Mm-hmm. I think that with things like climate change, it is so easy to fall into these two camps. So the one camp is the toxic positivity, Pollyanna, bury your head in the sand. Nothing's wrong in my neighborhood. I go to my organic grocer, I buy my food, I go about my life. Just going to turn off the news. The other camp is, all I'm going to do is watch the news, and there are so many structural problems and nothing will ever change, so despair. And I think underneath both of those extremes is a cop-out. Because if things are so bad that you're despairing, well, then there's nothing that you need to do, because what's the point of doing something if it's unchangeable? And obviously, when you bury your head in the sand, well, there's nothing to do because nothing's wrong. And I think the hardest work is to go into the messy middle and realize that this sucks. And there is a lot that feels completely overwhelming. Yet despair gives me no chance at making meaning or making the situation better. So I just have to show up and do whatever I can on an individual level, on a community level, to take some sort of action that aligns with my values and that tries to improve this situation. The reporting that I did for this in the book is on Brian Stevenson, who is the famous defense lawyer who represents people that are disenfranchised, marginalized, often find themselves on death row, and talk about someone that could just easily turn into despair. Sure. So he's working in a terribly broken system. It doesn't really matter who his clients are. The situation sucks. So he's either got someone that has been falsely accused and put on death row, or he's got someone that actually murdered someone. There's just suffering. All around him is suffering. And yet he's able to show up in that system and get really proximate. He goes into prisons and gets really close to his clients. And he shows up because those are his values, try to make the world better, and he does what he can. And that's such an extreme example. In the book, I say, I don't want to pressure anyone to be Brian Stevenson. You know, there's a reason that there's only one Brian Stevenson. It takes a very special, singular kind of person. But if he can do it, then we can do it in the smaller ways in our own lives.
That's so true. Thank you. That's really helpful. And I think I can get a bit caught up in the weeds of this topic. So that's why I wanted to ask you about it, because you are grounded and intentional. And so I thought you would have some thoughts there. And I think that is a very good point, is like taking a step. And I hope that's what our book is doing for people, to give them some steps to take. But yeah, I just appreciate your opinion on that. And I think it is a very important one in that way.
And I think intellectual people get caught up in like philosophizing this, particularly climate change. So it's like, oh, you know, everything has to be structural reform because individual actions don't really matter. And even if that's true, which I'm not convinced it is, you would know better than me, but even if it's true, there's this argument, and it's really like, you know, this was Martin Luther King's philosophy during the civil rights movement, that even if everything does need to be structural, taking individual actions, it like gives you hope. It keeps your dignity. It fuels you. So the way that I think about it, because I also care about climate change, not as much as you, and I could do better, but like I've been told countless times that all the recycling just ends up in the trash dump anyway, so there's no point of recycling. But there's something about like separating the recycling and washing it out that like motivates me to pay more attention to climate change. And I think that that's another false dichotomy, like structure versus individual. Why can't it be both?
Yes.
And I think for something like climate change, you know, I tend to get irked with people who are just like, oh, I don't recycle because, you know, I give money to this charity to fix the structural issue. Maybe recycling is the wrong example, because if it's truly a waste, then it's a waste. But do you see what I'm saying? Like, I think that we can both take these small individual actions, even if it's like pissing in the ocean, because one, if everyone were to piss in the ocean, it would fill up with piss. It's the wrong metaphor, but you know, things would get better. And number two, even if everyone's not going to do that, the simple act of doing something gives you hope and dignity to keep going and fighting the bigger issues. But climate change is a tough one because like, it's just a lack of will. I mean, I feel like the little that I know and I've read, like we do have the technologies to get probably 70% of the way there. And it's just a lack of will. And that's really frustrating and sad.
Yeah. And I would add to that, and like a lack of collective action, collective coming together, which doesn't have to mean going down to your local town and protesting, standing out on the corner. But as you mentioned, Brad, I honestly think from my viewpoint of this, you hit the nail on the head. This is exactly what I say, that when I tell someone to eat meatless once a week, is that going to make a difference to global emissions? Absolutely not. But is it going to make people be like, oh, actually, that chickpea recipe was really good. Maybe I can share it with my family and get my family to try this. And then and I've seen this myself, like becoming a vegetarian. My parents now cook a lot of vegetarian meals because when I've gone home, I've cooked for them and they've thought, oh, this is good. So is that making a difference? No. But then they shared it with my sister, who then now tries this recipe. And while it doesn't make massive action, as you said, with the recycling and the washing things out, it makes people think. So then the next time maybe you're at the store and you've washed out your yogurt pot, you're thinking, oh, well, this is a plastic yogurt tub. I wonder if there's a glass one, which there currently isn't, or not that I know of. But maybe you might be like, okay, well, maybe there's a local company I can work with. So at least, you know, I'm supporting a local business. And I think I really believe it's the seeds that plant in that way that can eventually lead to this point where everyone does have the confidence to speak up or vote with the climate positive candidate and all that. So I really appreciate you saying that, because I think that's my personal belief is exactly the same as what you said there. So thank you. Any last things? I want to, be respectful of our time here. And obviously, I want to encourage people to buy the book, Master of Change, How to Excel When Everything is Changing, Including You. What last point would you like to leave the listeners with, as they go on to think about this topic?
Well, I really appreciate this conversation. I feel like it was, it went places that I didn't think it would go. I don't think it was an insult. I'm really glad that we got to,
I didn't mean
to explore that. And you didn't tell me that you think my stuff sucks.
It doesn't. It's like the opposite. I'm like envious. Like, how come I can't write like that? So, yeah.
But I think that that's the trap of social media, you know, because like I can't run like you, but I don't care that I can't run like you. I'm not trying to run like you. I'm trying to run like me. And yeah, I think like, so I have closing words for you and then closing words for the audience. The closing words for you, Tina, are, I would just consider like, what's the point of the social media? And like, yes, it can feel disingenuous. It's only disingenuous if you're lying about stuff. So if you're going on there and being like, I'm going to tell you everything about my life and my life is great. Yeah, that's disingenuous. But if you're going to say, actually, I'm not going to tell you much about my life. I'm a writer and I use this for writing. So I'm going to share my writing. And some of my writing is going to be good. Some of my writing is going to be bad, but that's what I'm going to share. All the comparison stuff goes away. So that's something for you to wrestle with. And then for listeners, I think the most important thing to take away on this broader topic of change is we don't have to fall to extremes. We don't have to think that we can control the world and pick ourselves up by the bootstraps and bend things to our will, because that's bullshit. But we also don't have to sacrifice all of our agency when change happens. So we can hold these two ideas at once, that we can't control everything and we can be kind to ourselves and we can show ourselves a lot of grace. But there's also generally some steps that we can take and some productive actions that we can take that are in alignment with our values. And we can also be gritty at the same time that we're graceful. And in the book, I call it rugged flexibility. Like it's just these two diametrically opposed things that when you put them together, I think it gives us the best chance of navigating change.
Yes. That's so good. Thank you so much, Brad. I appreciate you.
This has seriously been probably my favorite podcast. And I haven't done maybe as many as you, but I really appreciate that we got to talk about these things that like I haven't been asked about. And you didn't even ask me why I wrote the book.
I did not. I won't be asking that to anyone anymore because I know how much they get it. But thank you so much. I appreciate you and can't wait to hear what people think.
Yeah, thank you. And congratulations on your own new book project. It's excellent. It's a really important contribution. And I'm just really appreciative about how you and Zoe have taken this sport that can all too often be seen as like self-serving or at worst selfish and painted it in a more collective, ethical light. And I don't think there have been too many books, if any, that are quote unquote running books that have this like ethical dimension. And I think that's so important. So thank you.
Thank you, Brad. That means a lot. Thank you. The Running for Real podcast and everything we do here at Running for Real would not be possible if it wasn't for the Running for Real team. While I am the person who you hear from most often and maybe the face of the brand, the rest of our team are such critical pieces of what we do. And without them, I think I'd just be running around in circles with ideas. So I want to take a moment to thank our team. To Jeremy Nessel, who's been with me since the very beginning. Kat McKay, Sally Pontarelli, Kelsey Wang, Sandy Gutierrez, Louise Murphy, Andrew Basola, Alexandria Will, and Maria Vargas. Thank you to each and every one of you for all that you give to Running for Real and our community. I appreciate you, and I'm so thankful for having you as a part of the team. Woo! I really loved that conversation with Brad. I always enjoy my conversations with Brad, but I think starting it off the way I did really allowed us to get down a level, which was really enjoyable for me, and I hope you enjoyed it too. I want to encourage you to go check out the links in the show notes to go get yourself a copy of Master of Change. You can also check out the links to the sponsors, check out Precision, including that fuel and hydration planner. You can also check out AG1 and Tracksmith to get those special discounts. There's links to all of those in the show notes by going to runningforreal.com/episode 367. I will be sharing some chapters from the Audible version of the book in the coming weeks, and I cannot wait for those to be shared with you. But in the meantime, go check out some of the other things we have to offer on the Running for Real podcast feed, including For Real episodes with Sarah Crouch. And I am going to be getting back on Together Runs as soon as I am running enough to be able to do so. Thank you so much for listening. I will see you next week.